and welcome back to the final part of this video series on Florence Nightingale. Last time we focused on question 2 and how she improved people's lives during the time she lived. What were our key findings? Let's remind ourselves, shall we? Now remember, we're travelling back in time from today. There are no TVs, aeroplanes, cars, and the world is very different to what we know today. But what have we learned about her? Now, what was she like as a person? Florence came from a very wealthy family, and that meant she had lots more opportunities than she might otherwise have had. One of them was the fact she was lucky because she could afford and she had the chance to travel around lots of different places, some of which we've mentioned. She also had a very clear view about what she wanted to do, and thought some of these messages had come from God. But what did she achieve within her lifetime? Well, her strong personality helped her achieve lots, because remember, in the Victorian period when she lived, women weren't treated equally. And wealthy women that came from really rich families quite often weren't educated and were mothers and wives, and that was about it. During a war called the Crimean War, she saved the lives of lots of soldiers because of the work she'd been doing on how to make conditions better. And then she didn't stop when she returned home, because she introduced professional nursing into the UK and wider world, meaning that they'd had training and were much better qualified to help people. Our final step is to talk about the impact Florence has had on the world, even though she isn't alive anymore. Has her work continued to make lives better even today? Well, here are 4 areas we are going to look at in more detail. So, let's get started with number 1. Professional nurses. As we mentioned in the last episode, Florence Nightingale is responsible for introducing professional nursing into Britain. Her nurses worked in hospitals and workhouses, so they helped the poorest as well as those that could pay for care. Nurses she trained also worked in America and even Australia, so she didn't just help people in this country, but others as well. We still have professional nurses today. Everyone has been helped by a nurse. There are even medals and awards named after her, but more about. Florence wrote a book called Notes on Nursing in 1859. It was massively important at her nursing school, even though it was intended to be used by people in their homes. It was even more important because people were only just beginning to understand what caused illness. She knew that it was really important that everyone knew how important clean conditions were to help people get better and stay well. Contribution to maths. Florence Nightingale was a talented mathematician. She excelled when she was taught by her father. Remember what we said. This was really unusual for wealthy girls who were normally just expected to be a mother and a wife. She used graphs such as the pie chart, and this was an unusual approach at the time. We use them a lot today. Florence used them to present reports about conditions in the Crimean War. She also used this in India. Let's look at that next. Sanitary Reform. Using what she already knew, Florence Nightingale improved lives by proving that bad drainage, dirty water, overcrowding and poor ventilation were causing a higher death rate for the British Army in India. There's Britain on our map, and all the way over there is India. Once again, she worked hard to convince people that things needed to change. And after 10 years of making improvements and better conditions, many more people survived. Her work carried on in Britain, and she once again tried to make sure lives improved by making sanitary conditions better. She persuaded the government to do this by making sure drains from private properties drained into the main ones. Can you imagine if she hadn't done that? Because of Florence, nursing changed forever. Remember, the first official training programme for nurses was set up by Florence Nightingale. The Florence Nightingale Medal for Outstanding Service by a Nurse is awarded every 2 years. The National Florence Nightingale Award is awarded in India. The Nightingale Pledge is taken by nurses and was established in 1893. And that is what it looks like. You can pause the video and have a look in more detail if you want. Let's finish this by going back to our original 2 questions, shall we? Should we remember Florence Nightingale? Here are those 2 questions. Did she change lives at the time? Definitely, that's a big tick. Can we still see her work's impacts today? Definitely. That's a big tick too then, isn't it? So should we remember Florence Nightingale? That's definitely a big tick. And that's it. We're done. I hope you've enjoyed listening to this video podcast series, and hopefully I get to see you again and talk to you soon.